You're watching How to Be a Better Human. I'm your host, Chris Duffy, and on today's episode, we're talking with the photographer and writer Craig Mod. Craig recently wrote a new book called Things Become Other Things that is such a beautiful examination of society and culture and the forces at play in both the United States, where he was born, and in Japan, where he now lives. But most of all, Things Become Other Things is a love letter to taking a long walk, to walking on these ancient pilgrimage paths in Japan. Craig has turned this into a creative practice. He takes photos, he writes books, he connects with people, he thinks about the world, and he thinks about himself. And I really think that every one of us can learn something from Craig's creative process, because it's not some sort of complicated, fancy system that you have to be a genius to learn. It doesn't cost a ton of money. He's not trying to sell you something. Instead, he's just trying to talk about the awareness that we have when we slow down to a human scale and when we look at the world around us and connect with the people near us. So without any further ado, here's Craig Mod, author of Things Become Other Things.
Hi, I'm Craig Mod. I'm a writer and photographer, and my newest book is called Things Become Other Things, and it is out from Random House, which is a big new thing for me. All of my other books have been pretty independent-based, but this one's out from one of the big guys, so go check it out.
So let's start with kind of a simple question that's also a huge one, which is, what does it mean to walk?
I mean, for me, a big part of it is just, it's a tool. It's a forcing function to just focus the attention. When you're really walking, you know, if you're being a considerate walker, you don't have your phone out, you have to be hyper present. I mean, I think we are just programmed evolutionarily in the sense of like walking rewards us because walking is what essentially saved us, I think, or pushed us to explore the world, to move beyond where we might have been, 50,000 years ago or whatever. And so, I mean, the reason why we walked all over the world was because it feels really good to walk.
And there's so many studies that talk about the physical health benefits and the mental health benefits of walking. But do you get at this kind of a spiritual aspect of walking and of exploring that some of us have lost? You have this great quote on page 13 of the book. But later on, in the path into adulthood, many of us seem to lose this simple impulse to traverse dirt, to push on the edges of what's known to us. We grow older and settle in, and the world shrinks. And the next time we lift our heads and survey things, it can feel like we've been stuffed into a suitcase.
Well, I think for me, what became sort of spiritual about the walking, it took a little while for me to recognize this, but it's the continuousness of it. So it's like if you just go for a walk in the afternoon, that's one thing. But really, when it starts to become kind of heightened is when you do it day after day after day for weeks. And, while I'm walking, I'm also photographing and talking to people. And I have all these rules. I have my walking rules. So, I'm not on social media. I'm not listening to podcasts. I'm not listening to music. I'm not looking at the news. So anything that can teleport you out of the moment. And even when I arrive somewhere, I don't touch any of those things either when I'm in the middle of a big walk, because again, it's about that kind of hyper presence. And it's when you start to do that day after day after day, and you start to, and I'm writing every day, and I'm trying to find things to write about. And every morning I wake up and I kind of go, well, is there going to be something to write about? Is there going to be something interesting enough in the day for me to encounter? And if you just believe in it, and every day you do it over and over and over again, you just realize, like, yes, the world, like the most banal of days, is full of so much potential adventure. I mean, that sounds so cheesy to say, but it's really true. Like, there are just so many interesting people that you're passing every single day that you never pay heed to, in part because you've teleported or you're playing Candy Crush or whatever it is. And if you just make it your purpose to engage with all those people, and walking is like the ultimate kind of hack / tool to just do that. And I think that's probably been the most, spiritual / theological element of all the big walks for me.
This idea of not teleporting, because I think while probably relatively few people listening are going to be able to, take a month off from whatever work and family responsibilities they have and just walk, I think this idea that we end up in our day like teleporting out of where we are by looking at our phone or by getting sucked into the news or social media, I think that's something that everyone can relate to. And something I know you really feel strongly about is using walking and using like being on this human scale to cultivate boredom, to actually be present, even if there's not something immediately attention grabbing about that's actually something really important.
Yeah, well, I mean, part of honing attention is driving yourself crazy with boredom. because then you just start paying attention more because you're so hungry for input. When you are walking, and my walks, I'll go hours and hours without talking to anyone or interacting with anyone. There's certain walks I've done where I'll walk for days and days and days past like pachinko gambling parlors, or like big box shops, and like it's just giant trucks trundling by, and so those kinds of days can be really, really quite exhausting. And your boredom is sort of at a peak, but you do pay attention to those things. So in a way that while you're driving a car, you can kind of, as you pass all the gambling parlors or whatever, you can kind of just, I don't know, in a car, it's really easy for your mind to just be elsewhere, I find, more so than in walking. Because I walk the Tōkaidō, which is the route between Tokyo and Kyoto. It's one of the old routes, and it's the route that kind of the Shinkansen, the bullet train, takes. I've walked that twice, and then I drove it with a friend over 7 days, kind of slowly, last November. And it was interesting to feel in the car acutely just how different the road seemed. So like all these bits and pieces that when I was walking kind of felt really dire and dour and exhausting. In the car, you don't even feel them at all, and you kind of just pass it. So part of it too, for me, is that boredom is really critical to kind of put a finger on the pulse of a country or the pulse of a place. And you can kind of tell by like how much that boredom is spiking. Or how much the exhaustion, or how much you're kind of like pushing back against where you're walking, how much that's spiking as I don't know, resonance of just where the country or the city or the prefecture or the state or whatever is at this moment in time. Which direction is it heading in? Is it being more generous to walkers or more generous to cars? But on like a day-to-day thing, if listeners obviously can't do a week or a month of walking. And with this, the real sad thing is most people wait till they retire to do it. And I don't see many other people doing like the Tōkaidō or the Nakasendo, but it's either college kids who are like on break, or like 65, 70-year-old men who've just retired and they're just pounding it out. But for everyday normal stuff, I'd say that the most transformative thing you can do, take the phone out of your bedroom. I haven't slept with a phone in my bedroom in like 15 years. That was really intuitive to me a long time ago. The phone's out of your bedroom. Get like an alarm clock. Braun makes a bunch of great little alarm clocks. They're fine. Or get a HomePod Mini if you really, really need to have some kind of connected thing near you, but just don't have it have a screen. And then in the morning also, don't look at your phone, don't touch it, put it in a place where it's totally out of sight, and I try to go until after lunch before touching my phone. And if you can do that, great. And I find that even just doing that, the quality of the work I'm able to do in the morning. And I try to also not have my computer be online. So it's like before you go to bed, you decide, okay, what's the thing I want to work on in the morning? You have that set up on the computer, everything else is turned off, and you just go right into that thing. And I find the space I can inhabit when I do that feels almost like godlike, compared to like when you have the phone and all these notifications are coming in, because your attention is just so in your own control.
I wanted to talk to you about, you have all these rules and these ways that you think about walking, but you do it in two really kind of dramatically different ways as far as your experience. One is solo, as really getting internal and doing your own creative work. And then the other is being in these small group walks with Kevin Kelly, where it's a group of people and you're all together the whole time and you're having these conversations at night. So can you tell us a little bit about like how the rules differ and how the experience for you differs between those two?
Yeah, I mean, they couldn't be more different. I mean, for me, the only way I'm able to do quote unquote real work, my the Things Become Other Things was written essentially drafted on a walk I did in 2021. That can't happen if I'm in a group, even with just one other person. I can't do it. Because when I'm alone and I'm walking and during those big moments of boredom, what I find my brain does to kind of take up the slack, because what my mind wants to do is it wants to write. It's just I just can't stop my mind from writing. And so as I'm walking and I'm in these deep, deep pockets of boredom, there's just tumbling sentences and paragraphs and thoughts and, sort of syntheses and as I'm moving, and I'm just kind of dictating it into notes.app, and just having it like do dictation, like literal, just like Siri dictation or whatever. So when I'm solo walking and I don't have any of the teleportation things, no social media, none of that stuff, and then I'm interacting with people on the road, that's the only time I can do my quote unquote real work. And then when I do something like I do with Kevin, where we're walking in a group, and I think the ideal number is 8, because what we do is we walk during the day for, 5-6 hours. And then at night we have a 3-hour dinner every night around one table. And 8 people is kind of the perfect size where even if you're in a slightly noisy environment, you can kind of hear the other person across like the furthest point across the table. And then we do a 3-hour so-called Jeffersonian dinner every night, where it's one topic, one conversation, which means there are no like sub conversations happening at one side of the table. Everyone is participating in every moment of the conversation. If a solo walk is about building a practice with yourself and honing sort of that sense of boredom and remembering what boredom feels like and allowing your mind to kind of flourish because of that, doing a walk and talk like Kevin and I do is about this incredible bonding that happens between people at these dinners over the course of 7, basically have 6 or 7 dinners. So you're having 21 hours of deep discussion with people over the course of a week, which as an adult, like basically no one does. It is so moving. And, again, like to do these walks, do I really have time right now to be going to Spain? And yet I know I've just prioritized it. I have this faith that doing these walks, doing these things, having these conversations are going to pay dividends so much bigger than what I have to sacrifice right now to get to the place and do the thing.
I mean, hearing you describe it and reading about it, it is one of those things where I do feel like, wow, that sounds so amazing, because it is something you don't get to do as an adult, is to have this really like dedicated time with people, but also to have this dedicated time where you're thinking about the same topic altogether for that long. Like even the 3 hours of one night is so rare for people to have. Like, we're just going to have a deep conversation that's not, let's just catch up, I think a lot of conversations are like, they end up being what you did and kind of a summary, and then the other person gives a summary, and then you say, okay, see you in another 3 months.
To talk about these different topics in depth with these different characters sitting around the table with you is pretty profound. And everyone kind of gets something out of it. It's like we finished that Spain walk, and like this happens with most of these walk and talks. People kind of go like, this was one of the most incredible, meaningful weeks of my life. And all, we didn't do anything aside from just walk and pay attention and be mostly offline. But yeah, it's shocking how something so simple, again, it's about this faith and, kind of what are contemporary theologies? What do they look like? What do they feel like? And I think doing things like this help codify, like what a good religious practice or healthy, contemporary modern religious practice feels like. And for me, these walk and talks definitely, feel like going to church in a really profound way.
2 final things that I'd love to talk about that play a role here, and I know that you really believe strongly in. One is kind of the like political and social choices that are made that allow for these full days to happen, right? You've written really beautifully about your adopted country, right? Like Japan, you've lived for more than 20 years. This is your home now.
Mm-hmm.
Japan has a really strong social safety net. It has the ability to have a comfortable, good life without having to work nonstop 7 days a week and still not make ends meet. And you've written about how that is part and parcel of how to find this fullness in those days. But on page 32 in your book, you talk about the Japanese word that loosely translates as abundance. And can you tell us about that concept and how that plays into all this?
Can you read?
Of course,
what I wrote, I think is the best explanation.
Great, of course. I'll happily read it. Okay. There's a word in Japanese that sums up this feeling better than anything in English, yoyu. A word that somehow means the excess provided when surrounded by a generous abundance. It can be applied to hearts, wallets, Sunday afternoons, and more. When did this happen to me? This extra space, this yoyu, this abundance. Space that carried with it patience and gasp, maybe even love. For a guy who provided almost nothing, these are the shocks of the walk. The walk makes me better than I ever could have imagined I could be. And in this, too, I see how good you could have been. And you're talking to Brian there. So there's this personal fullness, but there's also this abundance because you are living in a place that makes it possible to experiment and to support.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's difficult for people to understand who don't live in a country that has robust social safety nets is feeling your neighbors totally taken care of is an incredible thing to feel. Walking down the street in a giant city where you're passing tens of thousands of people and knowing that they can only fall so far is a weirdly exciting, uplifting thing to feel. And it's a contemporary American condition to not experience that, because I think most of the rest of the world, there is a pretty robust social safety net. In most first world countries that can do it, they've chosen to do it. You can be like, I want to have a family, I want to have 4 kids, and I want to run an independent bookstore, and I don't have to compromise. Like, those kids are going to be okay. Like, we don't have to pay $10,000 for family healthcare because, like, my company isn't providing healthcare, or whatever weird cockamamie thing is the standard in contemporary America. And so, from that you get that term yo-yo, which, as I wrote in the book, is this kind of excess space. I've been describing it more and more as like the space in your heart to accept someone else, the space in your heart to have empathy. And I think a lot of what we feel in contemporary American politics is this crushing lack of yo-yo on the part of, so many people that are, that have so little empathy for others because they're terrified, because that social safety net doesn't exist, because how far you can fall if you fall in a country like America. It's like, just go walk down the streets of, I imagine, downtown LA or downtown San Francisco. Yeah. It's on display. Like, that's how far you can fall. And I think everyone in America kind of feels, to a certain degree, like, that could be me. And the reason I left 25 years ago when I chose to move to Japan, and I think what moved me when I got here, was feeling that social safety net and feeling people being taken care of. And that was such a profound thing on a subconscious level to experience. That's part of why I decided to stay here. And then plus, cost of living was super reasonable, so I didn't have to compromise on my work. I have to add this caveat, like, of course, there's a terrible way of living in Japan, which is like the salaryman life or the salarywoman life, where you are just sort of completely yoked to this job and you can't leave because the expectation is nobody leaves until, like, your boss leaves or whatever. And you're working these terrible hours and you're doing these terrible commutes. Like, that is also very prevalent here, but any of those people could choose to step away. So that option is here. It is available if you want it in Japan, even as a Japanese person who classically would be plugged into that system. I've had many Japanese friends who opted out of it, and they have lived these, as poets, as painters, as musicians, and they've had incredible lives. And it's been made possible because of those social decisions that collectively everyone has kind of bought into and recognizes the value of. And I just want to say too, like, there are so many parts of America, even contemporary America, that I love and that are incredible. And it just makes it all the more heartbreaking that everyone in the States isn't able to, lean into and enjoy. I mean, the amount of entrepreneurial energy in America totally puts even a city like Tokyo to shame. Just that gumption doesn't exist. And so there are, I think, certain trade-offs. I mean, and they can be, it's not to say, like, you can't, if you have a social safety net, you don't have like kind of an entrepreneurial society. Like, I think that's a false dichotomy. I'm just befuddled by the fact that, contemporary America kind of keeps getting in its own way of achieving that vision. It's very bizarre to me, because there is so much I love. And I am really looking forward to this book tour, because these are all cities and places, and I know there are going to be people that I just love that are there. And I just can't wait to be part of that. But at the same time, I want all of you to feel what having this abundance is like, what having yo-yo feels like. And I wish that I could give everyone that gift in America and see what happens, see what kind of decisions were made, understanding what's possible.
Craig, it has been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for making the time and giving us the energy to be on the show. I really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.